Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
I would just say at the end of the game, they just executed. I mean, that was the difference. It was a hard-fought game. Obviously, we went into overtime. They had the momentum, they took advantage of it, and they executed. So with that being said, they just executed at the end.
Yeah, man, I gave it all I got.
Thank you.
You can't be mad at the results if you give it all you got. You know, if you have any regrets, you didn't give it all you got.
They gave it all they got, but I agree with Terry and Arnold. It came down to execution, and down the stretch, Michigan out-executed Alabama. Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Visit Tuscaloosa alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. We heard from Arnold. We heard from Aboigbe. Aboigbe kind of said, you know, you play as hard as you can. You got to live with the result. But for the first time since Nick Saban arrived at Alabama in 2007, the result is the Crimson Tide has gone 3 seasons without a national championship. Now, the Rose Bowl College Football Playoff Semifinal, Rodney, it was a game of big momentum swings. It was not the prettiest game. It was a little bit sloppy. But in the end, one team was going to stand and advance the national championship game. Early on, Bama gets a muff putt. They get a fumble. That leads to Jace McClellan breaking free for a 34-yard touchdown run. Bama was up 7-0, but early on there were signs that they were going to struggle in the line of scrimmage against Michigan, and Michigan always had the answers. The Wolverines come back. They would take a 13-10 lead into halftime, and Alabama, though, would control the third quarter. Even though there was no scoring in the third quarter, Alabama controlled it, and that set the Tide up early in the fourth to take the lead. And Bama was in good shape after Jace McClellan scored his second touchdown. A Will Riker 52-yard field goal made it 20-13. But Michigan on 4th down and 2, they really did a great job here. They rushed up to the line. They're at their own 34-yard line. Alabama didn't get set on defense, and Corum was just out there running by himself and blocking the back, or it would have even been a bigger gain. And that led to a touchdown pass as the Michigan team drove it down. Roman Wilson, who had a huge catch on a tip ball, gets the TD. And we wound up going to overtime. Alabama had a chance, but had to punt. Michigan almost fumbled the ball in the end zone for what would have been a safety. They spotted it at the 1. And it all came down to this, Ronnie. Jalen Milroe, after a timeout by Michigan, a timeout by Alabama, the quarterback keeper there. I think they're, speaking of execution, I don't think it was executed correctly. Rod, but the bottom line is that the Tide, hey, they played a lot of games like this year. Let's be honest. When you find a way to win these games, it's great. But when you're on the other side of one, it's very, very tough.
You know, look, I thought in the second half, Alabama pretty much controlled the game, as you talked about. I think, you know, the way they bounced back from the first half was really impressive. They made a lot of really good adjustments. The last 4:41 of the regulation, Michigan controlled the game. I mean, you know, they marched right down the field. But, Gary, here's the thing. We talked about this last week. The one thing I was really fearful of this Michigan team, they're a veteran team. They have a lot of experienced players. They're a very mature football team. They're tough. They're physical. All of those things. A lot of Alabama fans thought, you know, they don't have much speed. Alabama's going to dominate. It's a typical Big Ten team. No. They weren't flashy, but they're a really very mature, sound football team. Yeah,
and they had 6 sacks, and Alabama did not record a sack in McCarthy. And early in the game, Rod, I want to get your opinion on this. I thought from a schematic standpoint, early on, it like Michigan had a better scheme to attack Alabama than Alabama had to attack Michigan.
Well, I mean, again, I think sometimes when you have these types of games, Gary, it takes a little bit of time to make some adjustments. I think Michigan did a great job of preparing for Alabama. You know, someone pointed this out to me. This game might have been better for Alabama had Michigan not had a month to prepare for Alabama, prepare for Milroe, the things they were going to see. Because, look, they hadn't played against a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. This was a real challenge for them defensively. They did a fantastic job. And let's not forget now, Alabama was a little bit banged up in the offensive line. Caden Proctor, the left tackle, played with a ligament damage to his ankle. So, you know, again, that's not an excuse. I think Michigan played really, really well. But it goes back to what we talked about. They were a veteran team, especially on that defensive front, and they really won that in the trenches.
Yeah, Michigan outgained Alabama, 351 to 288, but the Tide had over 170 yards rushing and would have had more had it not been for all the lost yardages on the sacks and, again, a couple issues with snaps again. But Michigan gets the win. According to USA Today, Coach Saban did not watch the other semifinal between Washington and Texas at the Sugar Bowl. He said, according to Ms. Terry, they watched Netflix. All right, speaking of the coach, let's get to Coach Talk. After the loss to Michigan, Alabama Crimson Tide head coach Nick Saban echoed a message that he's been really saying all year that this has been an incredible season and a fun team to coach, that the group stands out because despite not winning the national championship, Alabama got better and accomplished a lot, and he doesn't want that to be forgotten just because they didn't win last night.
I think this team probably improved from the South Florida game and the Texas game early in the season as much as any team I've ever coached. And that takes a lot of hard work, a lot of people being very committed to doing things that they need to do to self-assess and improve their game. And all these players bought in on this team and did it in first-class fashion. So that's why I think, for me as a coach, maybe not for everybody else, it was one of the teams that I always remember most and be the most proud of.
All right, Rod, let me get you in here again because I think that both things can be true. I think you can be disappointed in how the season ended, not making it to Houston for next Monday night's national championship game, and still acknowledge what an amazing season. You know, when they were sitting there at 2-1 after losing at home to Texas and struggling to beat South Florida on the road, not a lot of people gave Alabama a chance to be where they are. They're 12-2. They went 9-0 in the SEC. A lot of Georgia fans are sitting back today. A lot of team fans are taking victory laps now because Alabama lost. But Georgia fans saying, well, we're the best team in the SEC. Well, you should have won the game. You didn't win the game. Alabama beat you. So I think you can be disappointed in how it finished and still acknowledge that it really was, in a lot of ways, a magical season.
It was a great year. I mean, look, after that Texas game, I remember leaving, Bryant-Denny Stadium thinking, you know what, this team is potentially a 3 or 4 loss team. They just did not look very good to me that night. And I thought, obviously, the next week against South Florida, I mean, that was a real struggle. But the progress that they made was really incredible, Gary. And there's a lot of highlight moments. The Ole Miss game, how they came back the next week after South Florida. The Tennessee game, coming back from 20-7 at half and dominating the second half. The LSU game, Milroe has 4 rushing touchdowns. I mean, I think that was a real highlight game. And then, of course, who's ever going to forget 4th and 31? And then, you go to the SEC championship game, and a lot of people weren't giving this team a chance. And they beat Georgia. They end the 29-game winning streak. Nick Saban now 5-1 against Kirby Smart. So there's a lot of highlights to this season.
Yeah, and let's not forget about yesterday. A lot of people want to forget this because it was Alabama involved, but Michigan was the favorite. Michigan was undefeated. They were number 1. They were a 2-point favorite in the game, and Alabama took them to overtime. So it's not like the underdog upset Alabama. Alabama was the underdog, Rodney, and they had a chance to win. Could have won the game. They didn't. So before we get to the break, though, just now you quickly come back, and you know how it works. You immediately start transitioning to next season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've got to finish off recruiting. You have another signing day coming up. You've got the transfer portal. They're going to continue to bolster the roster there for next year. And, then all of a sudden you're into spring practice. So you're headed towards 2024. And, look, I think it's got a chance to be – Alabama's probably going to be preseason top 3 or 4.
Yeah, indeed. And spring ball will be here before you know it. All right, we're going to change gears a little bit. We've still got more football talk, but also we'll talk Bama basketball as Crimson Tide is set to open SEC play this coming weekend up in Nashville. And as I said, we'll discuss more football with players that have to make decisions on where they're going to play next year, where it be at Alabama, where it be at another school, where it be in the NFL. Tide got back today from Los Angeles, so we'll have that discussion. And, of course, we'll also be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets in just a little bit. That phone number is always 205-348-WVUA. That's 205-348-9882. We'll be right back with the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV.
You got to value this game, and all the little plays and critical plays, they matter, and they affect the game in a whole. So with that being said, come out here, man, and finish the job, man, and continue to lane.
Every play matters, that's for sure. Welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Visit Tuscaloosa. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Terry and Arnold again after the Rose Bowl, and he's one of a number of players, Rodney, they're going to have to make decisions on what they're going to do in regards to the NFL draft. Let's get you out to Mount Moore this afternoon. The team flew in on a couple different jets, but this was the first arrivals on the buses back to Mount Moore. And you mentioned Caden Proctor. You're going to see him here in just a moment wearing that boot. And again, this is a guy that played with reportedly a torn ligament in his right ankle. You can never say that he's not tough. Kevin Steele and that defense, most of the game they held up well. In fact, the second half they held up great until right there at the end of the game in the overtime. Justin Aboybe and Jaheim Otis, two of the defensive linemen, and you're going to see Dallas Turner. There's Will Reichard. Great career for him as he's leaving. He'll be in the Senior Bowl. And finally, you see Dallas Turner. I guess that's probably just kind of walking away because he's already announced that he is going into the NFL. Did that after the loss. All right, Rodney, let's talk about what decision time for Alabama. You've got Turner's already declared for the draft. You got other guys that we're watching, obviously J.C. Latham, Quaid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold. Out of those three, do you think there's, all three will go to the NFL or anybody will come back?
Yeah, I think J.C. Latham, I would expect him to go. I would certainly expect Kool-Aid to go. I think Terrion Arnold may be the one that's a coin flip. Well, again, I think if he comes back and you have Terrion Arnold and Trey Amos at the corners with some young guys too that I think they're really going to be able to develop there, corner could be a real strong spot.
Now you have some seniors that have announced they're coming back for their COVID year for the fifth year. Trey Amos, Quindarius Robinson, Kristen Story. Other seniors that have eligibility left, we don't know what they're going to do. Rodney, include Trez Marshall, Seth McLaughlin, Tim Smith, Chris Braswell, Malachi Moore, Roydell Williams, Jace McClellan, Jermaine Burton. That's a pretty strong list of guys. What are you thinking out of that group? I obviously think Burton's going to the NFL. Anybody there that, I think most of those guys are probably going to move on, don't you?
I would really hope that Tim Smith would come back. I think he's a guy. Now, again, I have no idea what he's thinking, but, he's got a ton of potential. I think another year might help him. I think another year of maturity could really help him. So maybe Tim Smith.
Players already announcing they're going into the portal. Tyler Buckner, Ja'Cory Brooks, Anquin Barnes, and Isaiah Hastings, and you got some news on Shaz Preston today.
Yeah, Shaz Preston, wide receiver, been here a couple of years. He's hit the portal, which really isn't a surprise. He hasn't played much.
And players coming in from the portal, L.T. Overton, Damani Jackson, and Niquel Betron, the offensive tackle from A&M, a good group. Coaches that we know are leaving, Coleman Hutzler is going to become the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State. So let me leave with that before we move on. Obviously, there's going to be one position opening on defense. What do you think in terms of coaching staff? Any other shakeups?
Well, again, I think those are really hard to predict. It's going to be really interesting to see. Is George Hilo, who he brought in, Nick Saban brought in, who was formerly at Michigan, will he be the outside linebackers coach? Will they maybe make some adjustments to the staff, bring someone else in from the outside? I mean, we really don't know right now because Nick Saban said, during the practices that he didn't have time to figure out who was going to fill that spot, with Hutzler leaving.
And Travaris Robinson, his contract expires in February, but you have to believe Alabama's going to do what they can to keep him.
Well, yeah. I mean, and a lot of these things, Gary, are generally handled, in the offseason, after recruiting, whatever it might be. So I think sometimes people make a little bit too much out of it.
Yeah, we'll take phone calls later. We've got a couple emails about players possibly what could happen next year, too, that we'll get to. Let's talk some men's basketball because it's kind of quiet with all that is going on with football. But Nate Oates and the Crimson Tide played their final non-conference game of the season this past Saturday in Birmingham at the Legacy Arena in the CM Newton Classic. And listen, man, they wore out a pretty good Liberty team. I mean, absolutely blitzed them 102-46. No, well, that was the score against South Alabama. This was a 45-point game that they won over Liberty, second largest margin of victory this season. 102-56 was the final. Nate Oates reaches 100 wins faster than any coach in Alabama basketball history. They lit it up from three. Rod, this is a team we know when they make threes, they can beat a lot of people. Now they get ready to go into SEC play, and I think, quite frankly, get a break. They open up on the road. Traditionally, Memorial Gym is a nightmare, but Vanderbilt's not very good. They're 5-8, and they have lost to some really bad teams. So, Rodney, as you head into SEC play now at 8-5, an okay record, not a great record, but we know who they've lost to. What are you expecting from this Alabama team?
Well, I mean, I think, again, they had hit a little stretch there where they played some really tough teams. They didn't have much success, and then now they have these back-to-back games, and, maybe they're hitting some rhythm. Look, I think we talked about this over and over and over again with all these new players, Gary. I think sometimes it takes a little while to develop and kind of gel together.
Yeah, that's still going to be the challenge, too. Again, when they play teams that can't match up with them talent-wise, they can really make you look bad. Again, we mentioned the win over South Alabama, this win over Liberty. They've had a couple other major blowout wins. The key will be against the Kentuckys, against the Tennessees, against the Auburns, against these experienced, big, physical teams as to whether or not Alabama can help out. I think Grant Nelson's the key. He is a guy that's kind of a unicorn. He's still, though, right now shooting under 30% from three-point range, and he's a guy that he needs to really step it up in SEC play. All right, still to come on TITV, our popular Bama in the NFL segment is coming out. Find out which former Crimson Tide star stood out over the weekend, and we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number 205-348-9882, or you can email us TITV@WVUA23.com. We'll be right back with more TITV right after this timeout. Let's get to Bama in the NFL. Najee Harris is still a beast, folks. Watch this touchdown run. You know, the Steelers are another team that had offensive line problems. But I'm telling you what, Najee Harris can still get it done. 122 yards a season high, 2 touchdowns. He's the first ever Steelers running back to rush for over 1,000 yards in each of his first 3 seasons. And you know how good the Steelers have been at running back. Hey, the Eagles, Julio Jones can still get it done. He had 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, the Eagles got beat late. Devastating loss for them against the Cardinals. But Julio, watch this one, Roddy. Gets tipped, and he just muscles it in. Houston Texans, man, I tell you what, Will Anderson Jr. is in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Came back after missing a couple of games with injury. 2 sacks, 6 quarterback pressures as the Texans beat up the Titans 26-3, the final. All right, it is time to take some phone calls, and we're going to get started off with our pal Sammy up in Walker County. Hey, Sammy.
Hello, Gary. Rodney, Happy New Year, guys, and great job. I've been watching Alabama football for many years, a little longer than y'all, but I've never seen a problem that they couldn't correct, but after 14 games, this year was one of them. That center quarterback exchange, it never was corrected. It haunted them to the last play of the year.
It did. It did, Sammy. I've gotten so many texts today, radio show, emails. We got an email about it already sent to us, plus your call. I don't have an answer. People have asked me, I don't know, Rodney. I don't know how this happens and goes through an entire season and you can't get it fixed or you can't find someone else to play the position. I like Seth McLaughlin. Obviously, he's a good player. They wouldn't have kept him in there. But Sammy's right. This never got corrected.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It really is. I don't have any answers. All I can say is that, obviously Darian Dalcourt's a guy that had played center, Gary. A lot of people said, well, why didn't you plug in Darian Dalcourt? I think that he battled some injuries this year that may have hampered him a little bit. Not really 100% sure on what that was or what it is that maybe kept him out. But, Seth McLaughlin did have some really good performances. He's had a lot of good performances throughout his career over the last few years. But whatever happened this year, it's hard to explain.
I know they worked on it, but again, it did. It haunted them right up until the final game. All right, let's get to Jack over in Northport. Hey, Jack.
Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Very well.
Prayers to your mom, Gary.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that very much.
Who's going to replace Reichert, number one? And does Milroe have more eligibility, or is he gone?
All right, Jack, a couple good questions. Will Reichert, man, they're going to miss him. But Connor Talty, freshman kicker, Roddy, was really highly recruited.
He was out of Chicago. He's one of the top kickers in the country. If Will Reichert would not have returned, like a lot of people thought he may go, but he came back, had a big year, obviously. But Talty was expected to be the guy. And, again, I think it was great that he had the year. He kicked a little bit, kicked off a few times and things like that. But as far as Milroe goes, yeah, he's got 2 years left, actually. Again, will he use those? Remains to be seen.
He used this one because he's already said he's coming back for one more.
Yeah,
for sure.
So he's got 2 more after this one.
Yep, so he'll be back for this year for sure. All right, thanks for the phone calls. We'll be back with our email question of the day as Tider Insider TV rolls on, and we can get another phone call in too, 205-348-9882. Stay with us, please. All right, let's get right to our email question of the day. It's brought to you by KDM Service Corporation. When it comes to heating and air conditioning needs, KDM Service Corporation serves your family like our family. Will there be a quarterback competition in the spring? From Susan over in Hoover. Yes, Susan, for the backup quarterback position. Listen, Jay Milroe's a starter. Can he get better? Sure he can. But he's an established starter. I would expect that the quarterback competition will be for the number 2 job.
It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who's here. A lot of chatter about Ty Simpson possibly hitting the portal. Again, nothing that we've heard that would confirm that. There he is right there. But you got Ty Simpson, who's a highly touted player, a really talented player. You got Dylan Lonergan. You've got Eli Holstein. Again, some chatter that he may, the true freshman may look into the portal. And then you've got an incoming true freshman, Julian Sayin, who was the #1 player in the country according to some of these recruiting services, certainly the #1 quarterback. It's a loaded room. It is a loaded room.
Indeed it is, and it's a good situation to be in. Alabama's got a lot of talent at the position, and they've got a returning starter. All right, let's get to a phone call. Robert in Brookwood. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Hey, brother, prayers for your mom. Real quick.
Thank you.
You're talking about bad snaps that's went on all year. Who is the O-line coach? Is that the issue? I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah, Coach Wolford is a very highly regarded line coach. You know, his offensive line in Kentucky won the Joe Moore Award before he came to Alabama. Again, I know people – I've heard it, Rodney, real quick, but I don't know the answer as to why it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know either. I mean, I don't know that anyone outside the program really knows. But I'll say this, Eric Wolford, yes, he is an outstanding coach.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for the phone calls and the emails. We'll be right back to wrap up TITV on a chilly night in Tuscaloosa. It's cool but pretty. We'll be back. Stay with us. Alabama women's basketball wrapped up non-conference play. How is this for dominant? On Sunday against Mississippi Valley, 91-26. 4 of Alabama's 5 starters scored in double figures, led by Aliyah and Sarah Ashley Barker with 18 each. Alabama's 13-2, 13 wins heading into the conference schedule. That's the first time in program history that's ever happened. So Alabama's looking strong. They'll play Ole Miss on Thursday night at 6 p.m. inside Coleman Coliseum for the SEC opener. Get out and support this team. They're really good, Rod. I mean, not only do I think this is an NCAA tournament team, I think this is a team that can get in the NCAA tournament and win a couple games. They're looking good. All right, everybody, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of Tider Insider TV. You can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 on WVUA 23 or find it anytime at WVUA23.com, or it'll be linked at TiderInsider.com. Real quickly, Rodney, we got 15 seconds. Bigger Than Bama, your book is out.
Yeah, it's not just about Alabama football. I know we'll talk about more about it later, but it is out, RodneyOrr.com. You can order it.
Yeah, get to RodneyOrr.com and order it. We're going to leave you with Noah Clowney scoring his first NBA points with the Brooklyn Nets. He got moved up from the developmental league team, and he's scoring baskets now in the NBA. All right, that is going to do it for TITV. Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you again next week.